Test, test, test.
Well, does freeze that kind of thing. Probably not having stuff there too. This one, right? I would have been part of the problem.
Hi, welcome to Northwest Film Forum. I'm Courtney Sheehan, the new program director here, and we're going to start everything off in just a few moments, but first we're going to have a really brief season preview for you. We're going to show a couple trailers for films that we have coming up this season, including Vic and Flo by Denis Coté, and In Bloom, and also Winter in the Blood, which Tracy Rector of Longhouse Media will tell you about real quickly here.
Hi, I'm Tracy, and I run Longhouse Media, a Native nonprofit. We teach Native youth filmmaking skills, but we also produce stories by and about Native people. I've been doing this for about 12 years, making films in Seattle, and part of that process is creating opportunities for young people to become filmmakers and to get work on sets. So Winter in the Blood contacted us and asked if we could train some Native interns to work on a feature film set. So we said yes. And it was a really great opportunity to add some legitimacy and authenticity to a very important Native story by James Welch. So you'll see the trailer. If you come here February 27th through March 6th, the movie will be showing, and we made a behind-the-scenes doc as well to go with the movie. So enjoy.
Creative director here, and all these films programs here and for this season are coming from Courtney Sheehan, our new program directors for cinemas, and they are very excited by her choices, and this panel, in fact, is hers as well, put together a couple weeks ago out of a Manola Dargis article, and I know you're all here for that, but you are also here, I bet many of you, most of you, for Mr. James Keblas in recognition of his 9 years of great service to the city of Seattle. And I just want to say, on behalf of Northwest Film Forum and independent film, I would also speak for music, but I'll speak for independent film and Northwest Film Forum. Thank you for making the city more exciting, more alluring, more enthralling for independent film production. And can we give a warm Valentine's Day? We will miss you, James.
Can I say one thing?
Yes.
I'm a film guy!
So, having said that, I'll bring on Courtney Sheehan, our program director.
And Megan Griffith.
Who will facilitate the panel. And Megan Griffiths will join. She, as you know, is the director of Off Hours and Eden and Lucky Them, and she'll join, and also James Keblas. Thanks for coming, everybody.
I'm
bringing one of each,
Yeah.
depending on how this conversation goes.
Yeah, me too.
I think we're all represented there well. So thanks to both of you so much for joining in on this conversation. It's funny that it was all inspired by an article by Manohla Dargis in the New York Times last month, about a week before Sundance. She kind of came out with this plea for sanity, where she begged that distributors stop buying so many films, in part, and quite directly, she kind of admitted so that she didn't have to review all of them in New York. More than anything, it signals a sort of shift in the different parts of the industry's landscape and how they work together, and gives a good moment to stop and kind of take stock of the state of the industry. And I thought particularly it might be interesting to consider how the Seattle context and industry might be different, what's going on that's unique here, and what better way to do so than to talk to some of the people that know it the best, Megan and James. So with that, I guess I would just start by asking what you guys would say in response to the question, what's changing, what's changed, and how might we categorize or characterize the state of the film industry in Seattle today?
I hate what's happening for the record. Downhill completely. Laughter is the medicine that I'm choosing.
Oh God, where to begin?
Here's all I'll say.
Yeah.
I hated that article. I absolutely hated that article. I thought, for me, what matters is the filmmaker and the consumer of that film. Mm-hmm. And I felt like her whole thing, and all due respect to the place that we're in right now, was about protecting the middleman. It was all about, but what about the middleman and the theaters and the distributors and all? Who cares? It all matters about the person that wants to make something and the people that should see it. Those are the only two people that matter. And the idea that we need to protect an industry or an old world or a method and a platform and gatekeepers and filter, that doesn't matter. The market needs to figure that out. What matters are the two people from the beginning to the end. And I felt like it was all backwards. That was my big takeaway, and it made me think that it was her POV was very NYC, right? It was. And it was a party that places like Seattle was never invited to anyway. So screw them. I have no skin in that game.
How many people in this room read the Manohla Dargis article? Okay, a lot of you guys. But for those of you who didn't, she's a New York Times reviewer, and she was basically decrying the fact that these distributors are buying too much stuff and putting too many things in the theater, and the New York Times has to review all of them, and it's hard. And that's the tone of the article in a nutshell. All due respect to Manohla Dargis, who I actually really love as a reviewer. But yeah, I read the article when it came out, and it was kind of making the rounds on Facebook, and it really, it bothered me, the tone of it, especially there was a sort of section of it that said, there's a lot of bad movies that are out, which is true, but it basically was saying it's I think she said it's instructive that so many of the movies that are making top 10 lists and that are getting nominated for awards are studio films, and her implication was that it was instructive that studio films are better than independent films, and I just thought that was such an off-base way, because it's instructive of is that those films have more promotional money, and they can get to more people and more people see them, and so they end up on these lists. I don't think anyone could argue that there's a higher percentage of good studio films than there are good independent films. So there's certainly plenty of bad in both, And so anyway, it just really bothered me, the tone of her article. And as a person who has had a film that has been released in New York for a week and gotten a New York Times review, I wouldn't want that to be taken away from me just because it was a small release and didn't do a lot of business and get nominated for every award. Every filmmaker, if you can get to that point, you deserve to have the chance to break out and have your film sort of catch fire, audience word of mouth, and just because somebody doesn't want to review it is not a good enough reason for that to not be a chance you get.
Right.
So yeah.
So I'd like to read a quotation from it. She says, "American independent cinema is a confusing, contradictory, and maybe useless designation. who, after all, is independent. Yet it is used to seem like both a refuge and a promise, a place where art and industry were on equal terms. So I think this might be interesting to consider in relation to perhaps, I don't know, say thinking about the past decade or so of the film industry here in Seattle and the role of the Mayor's Office of Film and Music in that, and especially considering today that a lot of the initiatives coming from the office that you've championed, James, have supported independent and commercial endeavors, and perhaps that's part of what is spoken to here.
Yeah, yes.
Sure it is.
I mean, when I first got this gig, the reason I jumped up and said I'm a film guy is because I was first kind of defined as a music guy when I got the job, and it feels so good to have it flipped around. And I think it's part of the incredible journey that has gone on over the past 9 years. I mean, you're the poster child for that, and I've gotten to ride those coattails and help in some way, but really just kind of follow. And when we talked about film in the early days, I always used to say, we didn't wait for the Rolling Stones to come to town to decide we had a music industry here. We built it on ourselves. Like, yeah, sure, you want the Rolling Stones to come to town, and there's some industry that goes along with that. But it doesn't define you, because once they leave, what's left? So while it's great to have a Hollywood production here, it shouldn't define us as a film industry. We need to build our own film industry. It certainly will mean more. It'll be a representation of us, and it absolutely will last longer. And so that's where I tried to put a lot of focus. And I think it was great because at that time it was all about incentive. It still is all about incentives. But Seattle really had lost a lot of its business because it wasn't prepared for the shift in what happened. It wasn't about locations anymore. It was about money and all of these kinds of things. And other areas across North America started taking advantage of that. But we didn't at the same time realize what we could do. So I would kind of think, well, rather than try to win at that game, I mean, I do want to win at that game, don't get me wrong, but it's more of a long-term initiative. Rather than just play that game, let's shift the game. Let's make our own game and then try to build that up. And that's where I just was really turned on by latching on to Megan and others and just doing whatever it took to support their success. And then creating a infrastructure and an office around that. It wasn't like, here's an office, you guys get in line. It was like, what do you need? You tell us. Yeah. We'll fit that to make it work.
Right. So Megan, what's your experience been like? I mean, you've been in this filmmaking community for 14 years, right?
Yes.
So you've seen probably multiple shifts.
Oh yeah, it's changed. Like it's unrecognizable from when. I mean. And granted, my perspective has also been changing on it over the course of those 14 years, and so I don't want to disrespect anyone who was here in 2000 and doing a lot of great things, because I was at a much lower level of sort of like hobbyist filmmaking at that point as in my life, so that was sort of my view of the city. But it does feel like there was like a bit of a seismic shift in the sort of 2006 to 2009 realm. That it just, it changed. And I mean, a huge part of that was just that I remember when I first got here working on independent films, where nobody worked with the film office at all because the permits were so expensive, and everything I worked on was no budget, so it still pretty much is. But it is, it was like no one wanted to pay $150 a day or whatever it was at the time. And then I have a specific memory of like how accessible everything all of a sudden became when permits were dropped to $25 a day. And it was like, oh, okay, we can actually do this like in a legit way and not be so guerrilla about everything. And then it sort of just kind of grew from there, and the incentive program obviously made a huge impact on that too. And that needs to, grow and change and get better and better. But yeah, it's a different world for sure than it has been. It's just getting better and better.
And the other thing that I would say in response to the article was I felt like she was saying that there are different camps. Like there's a independent filmmaker camp, and then there's a studio filmmaker camp, and then there's commercial camp, and the camp should never meet. kind of thing. And I just kind of, once again, that's not reality. Forget even just talking about film. That's not reality in content. If you're a musician, if you're a filmmaker, if you're a writer, if you're a game maker, it doesn't matter. You have to figure out how to create a portfolio of activity across multiple kinds of disciplines and activities and platforms to make a living and to also enrich. And the beautiful thing about now is that content is so good and people are finding new ways to tell stories and the money is following that that's why we created Commercialized Seattle. Like, who cares? Make some money making a commercial. Leverage that to make your art film. Make some, be a writer for something. Teach for a little bit. Like, however it takes for you just to be creative and you don't have to be a bartender on the side, that's the goal. And how you produce out of that is up to you, but at least you have an opportunity to have some kind of middle class income and, and put that together. And once again, that's a story that is for everyone else except for those in LA and New York. And those places are becoming less important than they used to be, so we're winning. That means, it just means less to me.
That commercialized program is so brilliant because, and like the way it's advertised, like the branding of it is so like funny and awesome. As a person who's never been able to break into the commercial industry, I worked on one Snoqualmie casino commercial in my life, and that's the only commercial I've ever done. And I just I couldn't quite I've just always embraced the indie film world. But I also am a person who wants to hire qualified crew. So anything that keeps people learning and growing as a crew base in this town is awesome for me, and keeping them here instead of having them sort of fleeing the city because they can't make a living is great. So it's they're also sort of interconnected and they feed into each other. And Amy Lillard and I have talked about this on multiple occasions, but I made the off hours for nothing. And the reason that was able to happen was because a movie called Late Autumn shot and employed people for a 40-day shoot. It was like a $5 million film, and everybody turned around and worked on the off hours because they could afford it. Right. And that wouldn't have, if we hadn't had the incentive, that movie wouldn't have come here, and I wouldn't have, even though the off hours wasn't an incentive film, it wouldn't have happened if it hadn't been for that. So it's all part of the same ecosystem.
James, maybe you can give a kind of nutshell background on Commercialize It for anyone who's not familiar with the initiative.
Exploiting the natural resources and amazing things we have here for the commercialization of everything. Because without commercials, how would we know what to think? That's it.
There you have it.
I'm going to this. It's basically the idea that, like I was saying, that here's what happened. We've had a great run of feature films in Seattle for 2 years now, sometimes 4 at a time. It's been a really, really good run. And it was about a summer and a half, 2 summers ago. We had a lot of feature films happening at one time, and we had producers say, "You have a crew problem here." I went, "What are you talking about? A great crew here, And he's like, "No, you have a great crew. They just don't want to work for me." I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, "They'll just want to work on commercials. They don't want to work on feature films. There's not enough money here for them." And I was at that point, I was like, "Huh, interesting. What if we kind of look into this and see what maybe we are actually good at and what people really do want to do and what's paying the bills, and try to invest in that a little bit." So we did some market research. We looked at it and found out there's a there. And that is, a lot of people said, yeah, that's how we a living. That's how we meet other crew. That's how we get to exercise equipment that we wouldn't otherwise get to use. And then the 6 months of the years, we go and make our own, what we want to do and do things with the people that we met. And also, commercials, do you guys feel like we've gone back in time? I feel like it's 1940 all over again. The radio programs, right? Where it was underwritten by Crest toothpaste, but then you got this half-hour amazing show. Now everything is underwritten again, and there's a Chipotle ad that came out a few months back. that was phenomenal. Like, that was incredible storytelling, and it was a Chipotle ad. I was like, I don't care, that's awesome. Like, and the people that got to make that made beautiful, beautiful story. And that's happening more and more, where people get to make stories, and the money that's behind it isn't controlling the story, it's making the stories possible. And that's okay. And so kind of bringing all these things together, we created this thing called Commercialized Seattle, where the state and city and other folks in the sector are really turning our attention toward, so let's say we go down to almost said Olympia. What's on my mind? Go down to LA and meet with studio executives, or if we go to Sundance and meet with independent filmmakers. Now we're, in addition to that, we're also going to New York and meeting with ad agencies, or going to Ad Week and talking to people who just got a big Chevy contract and saying, hey, you should make that up here in the Northwest because we can do it better anywhere else. And we've gotten 3 projects. We just launched this back in October or September, something like that. Last year, we've already gotten 3 projects as a direct result of that. We go to ad agencies and they say, government has never come to us before. What? This is a unicorn. What is this? And you can make these things happen, and you want to give us rebates and all these kinds of things. And okay, let's do that. We you know, what we're learning is that Seattle isn't. They don't even think of Seattle. That's the reality. It's not like they don't think they can come here to make what they want. They're just not even thinking of it. I mean, it's not. We must well be in Canada, and not the Vancouver part of Canada. But
they used to. I'm sorry, they used to. In the '80s, there were tons of commercials.
Well, and that's the thing, because once you say Seattle, they go, oh yeah, like you have everything that we want. Like, and you have this great reel that you're showing out. Like, oh yeah, okay, let's do that. And we you know, like Apple, they just made a huge shot. I can say this now because the NDA is over. You know, they were going to go to New Mexico to make their big production. They came here and $2 million and over 100 crew, and they didn't even think of it before we started doing this. So that's what Commercialized Seattle is all about. It's about expanding the pool of potential business. And the beautiful thing about commercial work, in addition to anything I said, is that there's far more money, much more money in it, and there's less gatekeepers, and it's fun. So.
There was a lot of years where people would ask me about, like, how is it to live in Seattle, and I'd say Seattle's a great place to make movies. It's not a great place to make a living making movies, but that's something I'm actually having more trouble saying these days, which I think is a really good sign. So, because I think it's getting easier to make a living, not 100%, but it's getting there.
Right on. Well, on that note, I'd like to throw out a term that you've coined, Megan, Crutopia. Definition being a collective term describing the filmmaking denizens of Seattle, Washington, who share a common belief that the process of creating a film, commercial, web series, or corporate video should be mutually enjoyable, creatively enriching, professionally rewarding, and devoid of negativity. And how might the experience of
I'm hoping to add it to the Oxford English Dictionary.
Start with Urban Dictionary.
All right, fine. I'll set my sights a little lower.
So how has your experience as a member of Crutopia, morphed over the years of your time here in Seattle?
Well, for me, it's like I came to Seattle because I really liked the city. I used to come here when I was in high school because I lived in northern Idaho, and this was like the city closest to us. And so I just kind of fell in love with it, wanted to live here, graduated film school, and thought, I'll give it a year, see how it goes. And came here and sort of seeking out a community of people. I had a great film school experience, so I'd sort of been surrounded by all these people who had sort of like-mindedness and were fun to be around and creative and inspiring to me. And I was seeking that out. And at first I got here and I was trying to figure out how I fit in to this world, whether I could make it work up here or if I had to leave and go to one of the sort of more industry-centric cities. And I almost did leave after 6 months, actually, because I was really not finding it. The only thing I worked at Office Cine, RIP, and loved all the people there. Left that job temporarily to go work on Rose Red, which is a Stephen King miniseries probably a lot of you guys worked on, but really wasn't fulfilled by working on something that large at such a low, I just felt, that movie was really instructive to me because I stopped working on big movies. I decided I would rather work for free and have a day job on stuff that I was really interested in and had a little bit more of a sort of creative say in. And then I worked on a movie called Shag Carpet Sunset, which my friend Annie McAllister directed, and it was a $10,000 feature on film in 2002 or whatever, or no, 2001. And it's the reason I stayed in town, because I found that the beginning, the sort of the seeds of the community that I still am working with, where I just met people who I really loved and who I felt like were in it for the same reasons as I was, and then that sort of went to the next production and to the next production as has grown over the years, and I've held a lot of positions. I was a DP on that film, and then I was an AD for 5 years and been on sets a lot, and sort of like been able to find the people who I really love and who I want to spend 14 hours a day with, and who like bring that same sort of like energy of like how, you know, excitement and passion and positivity to set, and sort of build a community of those people. And I feel like that's representative of so many people in Seattle's crew base that it's not that way everywhere. Like people come in and they'll work on a movie here, and there's so many repeat people who come back, like Mark Duplass, for example, has like, he came here for True Adolescence, and then he came back for Hump Day, and then he came back for Safety Not Guaranteed wouldn't have shot here if it wasn't for Mark's good experiences that he had had before that, and like, you know, people just want to keep. My friend Todd Brohall made Cataclysm here and wants to come back and make another movie here. He's like, can't believe how great everybody is in Seattle. And so it's just like, it is definitely not the same everywhere. I'm sure there's other pockets of communities in the United States that are awesome, but it's really special. It's something really special that I think we have here.
Recently recognized Seattle as one of the best cities to live in as a movie maker, and the mayor's office was particularly called out, I think, in that write-up in Movie Maker magazine. So how does this idea of Crewtopia kind of resonate with you, James, and from your perspective of the work that you've done over the past decade?
We were higher than Portland.
That's all that matters.
What's specifically? I think that's the only way to do it. I mean, we're seeing the repeat films now. You know, Megan talked about it, but the folks that made 21 and over here, they tried to bring 2 feature films back. They also tried to bring a TV series here. Those things didn't happen for a variety of reasons outside of what we were bringing to the table. But they ended up bringing The Architect back here. That was shot here just a few months back. I mean, they put their financing deals together with investors based on filming here in Seattle, or in the region, I should say. And that is because they had a good experience. Crews work really hard. There's texture here. You know, it's not just the business. It's good business along with committed people who are good to be around when you make a story happen, and that transfers, I think, to the end film and what people are getting into. And we just need to be consistent and persistent at that. And I think over time that'll pay off. It's a harder road, and there's a lot of love happening here, and that's great. We're not anywhere near to where we should be. I mean, we're still have a long ways to go. We're moving in the right direction, but there's still a lot of road ahead and what we need to do. But the trend is right, and the attitude and approach is right for what we need for long-term success.
And yeah, related to that, something that Dargis did in this, the service of writing this article was survey 70 film professionals throughout the industry, asking them several questions and just kind of collecting people's responses. And one of them was, if you could change one thing about American independent cinema, what would it be? And I wonder how you guys might respond to that, either on that kind of national scale or, more on a local level of Seattle. And this might speak to, directions.
I don't know the answer to that question, but the thing that pops to mind is I feel like what's been happening sort of in the trends of these things is that there's a lot more movies getting made, and there's also a lot more ways to watch those movies. And what I feel like needs to be upped and sort of perfected is the ways that we as individuals find out what in that sort of a vast amount of content is something that we will like, and be directed to the right things. And part of that is curation by people like you and venues like this, and then some of it is just VOD sort of like logarithms and what Netflix does, but it feels like that is like a big sort of problem to be solved, and opportunity for a bunch of filmmakers to kind of get their work to the right people who might not have the sort of advertising dollars that large movies have, to get their movies to the person who is going to have their life changed by it, or or at least like it.
Yeah. I would say kind of two things I'd like to see changed. One is the term VOD, because for everyone else it's called the market. It's like, hey, we're going to create this idea that you can get what you want. Why don't we get that? I want to be able to hear about a film and have access to that film the moment someone tells me about it. And the idea that there's these barriers to it and time restrictions and all of these things that prevent me from having that just frustrates the heck out of me. And I feel like it's a disservice to a lot of, to the health of the industry overall. And I think the term VOD and if the article really points out, it's a derogatory term. Like, it means that you weren't good enough for theatrical. There's a problem with going straight to VOD. That should be the goal. I mean, we use theatrical more for a marketing purpose than we do actual sales or making money or doing anything like that. I feel like we should go, I'm going to get to the other piece here in a second. I feel like it should be something that is, rather than focus on, whether it's theatrical or not, let's focus on how are we smart about finding the audience that's going to care about this film and enough of them to pay back for the film. When I'm on Amazon or Google or Facebook, it is so smart. It knows exactly what I want. Like, I'm getting ads. I'm like, how did it know that? Oh my God, I searched for something I shouldn't have. Like, it knows so much, right? Like, oh shoot, my wife doesn't see that. Come on. I mean, this system is in place. It's time for distributors and people that help connect films to consumers to figure that out versus trying to protect an old, antiquated model. And I want that to really just be solved. It's so clearly in front of us. It's being utilized by so many other different kinds of products. Why can't it be used for this? With that said, in honor of our place here, the other thing I'd like to see changed is, I think the idea of going to see a film in a place like this, and you actually do a very good job because you do more than just watch a film. You've created a clubhouse. You created a community. You create conversation. You create a live performance element, right? I can buy music, but I want to go see music too. You can create communities so that we all have something to go with in that. And I think if more places can do that, they will have success and make the experience of filmmaking much more memorable and much more exciting, so that it grows beyond that. And this place does it very well. But the article was about the art house, right? And that, I mean, art houses are intimidating for mainstream people. Like, that's a scary environment to walk into if you're not cool. And and so I'll give you an example. My sister-in-law is not cool by any stretch.
This is being recorded,
Lisa, you're not cool. You know you're not cool, but I love you, and I do. But she was flipping through the channels, and she came across the Independent Film Channel, and she's fairly mainstream person and normally probably wouldn't be there, but found herself there and watched the movie Another Earth, which is a great movie, right? And she comes and she watches this movie. It blows her mind. She comes, tells me all about it. We're jamming, talking about it. She's now watching more. I mean, I think that's great. What we're doing is expanding the pie. Like, why, instead of saying, hey, we're a bunch of exclusive types that have an art house and this is our kind of little world, and if you don't get it, then screw you, and we're mad because it's not growing at the same time, then we're just saying, like, let's open this thing up. Let people discover it and wherever they're at and who they are, and create experiences here so that gets reinforced.
It's interesting. It sounds like you might agree with the chief of content at Netflix, who had a controversial statement several months back when he said that movie theaters were killing movie watching because they weren't allowing immediate access to films, even on the level of like Transformers or whatever, like day and date, like immediately when they're released, that they should be released on online platforms.
I strongly believe that.
All right. So what's the future role of the exhibitor in all of this?
Exactly what I said. I mean, I think it's about
Making it more of an event.
Yeah, right.
Opportunity.
Yeah. I mean, if I can watch anything that you are presenting at home, what different kind of value can you add that is different than what I could get at home? I think you do this. I think the Film Forum is probably one of the exceptions to the rule, actually. Mm-hmm. I think you provide a place for filmmakers to be better filmmakers. You provide a place for conversation. You curate. You actually give thought to there needs to be more of this. When I think the article wasn't about the Northwest Film Forum, I think the article was about like Sundance theaters or something like that. I think, I don't want to name any specifically around town, but I think it was like the places that aren't giving a little bit more to it.
Yeah, that said, I will say from a filmmaker perspective, I don't know too many filmmakers who got into the business to make something that you watch this big, and it definitely is more gratifying to go see your movie in a theater, in a proscenium, right. A dark room with a communal experience and a lot of people reacting to it. I know I've had test screenings with 5 people, and I've been in Toronto with lucky them in a 600-seat theater. And I prefer Toronto because not only because it's versus a test theater, but the reaction to the room just is infectious, and it right. makes a huge difference. So it's so it's there's got to be some sort of way to keep the theater alive in this conversation too, because I like to go see movies that way. I think the day and date, my film's about to be released the day and date, May 30th. I don't know if that's public yet. Just realized as I said it.
It's starting here.
It will? Yeah, that's what I heard. That's exciting. Come see it, May 30th. Anyway, but that it's going to be available just to people outside of New York, LA, Seattle, or however many theaters it ends up opening on the actual release date. That's really cool. I know a lot of people who live in smaller towns across the country, and the fact that they can watch my film the same day as somebody who lives in Seattle is awesome. But yeah, it's a kind of a balance there. I certainly don't want to see the theaters die.
In the words of Tilda Swinton, it's cinema spectatorship is so existentially intriguing because you're alone while you're together.
Mm-hmm.
Love Tilda.
Oh man, she's great.
But it's interesting that in part in saying that VOD might have a sort of stigma or a sort of negative stereotype attached to it, because I think in fact part of where Dargis's article came out of was that it's decreasingly so. That more and more we're seeing success stories of day and date or VOD only, and that in other words the proliferation of films is accompanied by a proliferation of platforms for distribution and reception. That in other words, like you're saying, James, the New York-centric model might not be relevant for every single film. So it's both a matter of VOD being something that makes sense for some things and not for others, and that's something that Dargis might be struggling with in terms of and maybe I'm reading a little bit too much into this on a psychoanalytic level of Dargis's investment in her role as a critic as the cornerstone of the industry in a way, but that it's very important to have that kind of critical stamp of approval on everything that is distributed.
Yeah.
I just think I should be able to choose whether I want to make dinner at home or go out to a restaurant for dinner, right? Like, and that option should all be there versus it being controlled by a few. And I think my frustration with her article was that she seemed to me to be very supportive of defending the few that control it all.
So, as some people in the room may know, this might in fact function as a bit of a prequel to an event that's planned on Tuesday by Kirk. See in the room here, I believe so.
Somewhere there he is.
Yeah, a sort of even broader scale state of the industry in Seattle caucus that Megan will also be speaking at, and I was wondering, how we might also segue into that event on Tuesday and what you guys think.
I'll let you take this one.
Oh.
I'll chime in.
Hey Kirk. I think what's happening on the 18th is absolutely fantastic. And I think it's the right thing to have happen. With me not being reappointed, I think here's the problem. The problem is people seem to like the trend and which way we're going. And that's really great. I enjoyed it as well. And to have that trend disrupted is a cause for concern. The key thing, I think, is to figure out how you channel that concern into real productive outcome. And so I think there's lots of different communities that are coming together to try to get in front of this. And that's super fantastic. And I don't think that would have happened 9 years ago, to be honest. I don't know if it would have happened in the way that it's happening, because while I loved my job, it's actually about the work, and it's about the office, and it's about the community that is represented by that office. And I'm not getting my job back. In fact, you'll be in very good hands with the amazing Kate Becker, who I think is up there, who decided to come in. Kate, raise your hand. And I've known Kate for a very long time, and you guys are going to be well served. And so what I think the 18th is about setting Kate up for success. And that means a really constructive conversation. That means it can't be a pitchfork event where we're going to get the witch, and it can't be a kumbaya moment either. It has to be, both of those are failures in my mind. It has to be in between that. It has to be about getting ideas focused and getting them shared, and then getting them delivered to Kate and the mayor and our leaders so that they know how to invest in the city. I do think it's an opportunity. I think there's incredible attention. Thank you to all the people that did that petition and the incredible social media. It was heard. I'm telling you, City Hall has been disrupted, and in a really incredible way. And don't lose the momentum and continue to be advancing the frustration into kind of productive thinking and hold people accountable and be respectful all at the same time. I think that's the key to moving forward, and I hope that the event on the 18th does that. I know simultaneously FilmWorks is having conversations, and the people that have the daily transactions with the Office of Film and Music are doing stuff, and this is Great. It's really, really good. So, I'm hopeful and looking for a job.
Anyone's hiring. Yeah. No, as a stakeholder in this artistic community, the only thing that I really want is to keep moving in the direction that we're moving, and make sure that we're just focused on the end goal and what we can do to help that happen. So I think that I can kind of speak for Seattle in that saying that we're not going to get sort of mired in the past, and let's just talk about the future. I think it's good. Yeah. As much as we'll miss you, James.
So to this.
It's done. So how might you guys respond to this observation, and I don't know, maybe people are just telling me this because they're like, oh, she's new, we can tell her anything and she'll believe it, but that Seattle's experiencing a bit of a renaissance right now, or certainly a high point in terms of culture and art making, and I'm also thinking of things like Charles Mudeta's piece on like Seattle has stolen the mic of the nation and won't give it back, the Seahawks, and of course, very, very exciting times, like we have a socialist on city council, like all of the really energetic movement around advocating for a $15 minimum wage. I mean, there's just like really exciting things happening in Seattle right now, and that this is also happening in the world of film. Would you say this is a fair assessment, and how do you see things happening?
I find it a pretty exciting time for Seattle film, personally.
You don't just have to tell me that because I'm new.
No, I mean, it feels like there's just like the community gets taken a lot more seriously these days in terms of national recognition. And when I go and say at a film festival that I'm from Seattle, people say, "Oh, I hear it's a great community up there." Like it's pretty it's a known factor, and it's pretty cool. It's growing. It's like as James said, there's so much more to do. Like I've been in LA taking a lot of meetings recently, and there's a certain size of movie that there's like a few different things that I'm sort of pursuing as like I'm looking for work, and I always want to try to bring things back here. And I know like other filmmakers who live here and have had such great experiences making movies here also, like Lynn, want to come back and make movies here repeatedly. I keep making stuff here. Lucky Them wouldn't have shot here if I didn't get hired to direct it. It was set in New York. So you want to like bring everything here, but there is a certain level over which like if there's a $7 million movie or a $10 million movie, it becomes a harder conversation. It's not as easy to say you're going to make, it's going to be worth your energy to come up and make a movie in Washington. Our incentive has a cap to it that is pretty low from a national standpoint. So like that, there's lots of things that need to sort of grow and keep changing. And the fact that we even have an incentive and it's 30% is great. But there's just like, there's work to be done. And so, it'll keep going the right direction, hopefully, if we can all sort of channel that energy into like making that happen.
Yeah, I agree with all of that.
Seconded.
Yeah, 100%.
Does anyone have any questions for Megan or James about the past, the future, the present?
Covered everything. I thought there would be so many more hands.
About the Enola Dargis article, I think she gets it exactly backwards. I remember there was a panel about the state of film some 20 years ago, or maybe more, with Pauline Kael and Godard. And Pauline Kael went first and said film was so bad because of Hollywood, and she had just come back from working there, and she went into all the bad things that happen in Hollywood. And then they asked Godard, and he said, the reason film is bad is because of you, to Pauline Kael. Critics, and by the end he had her admitting, all newspaper critics, that if there are two films playing in town, The Third Man or whatever at a revival house, and the equivalent of the Transformers or Beverly Hills Cop 6, you're going to have to review that, because if you keep going to review the best film in town that's playing at an art house, you'll get fired by the newspaper because they'll withdraw all the ads from you. So the problem is that what's sucking up all the oxygen in the air is the fact of having to review all these other films, which really don't need reviews, they just need ads. And people finding ingenious ways to talk about the culture through the film or to complement some aspect of the film rather than saying basically there is no point in writing about this. And so that's the problem, and it's still around. How do you get people to films that are set at different rhythms, instead of assuming that everything has to be like this, so the critic, by paying attention, it legitimizes them.
Right, and that was one of the responses to Dargis's article. I think it was Sam Adams who said, basically, it seems that it's inevitable that the New York Times might change its policy, which is that if film opens with a 1-week run in New York, it will get reviewed by the New York Times. And given the fact that they reviewed about 900 films last year, which was 75 more than the year before, they might be changing their policy on that, and that might be what Dargis was indicating. But that a film like, the Hollywood blockbusters don't need a review to service it because it's not affecting the audience that's going to see it. Tracy?
Do you have any recommendations or any models for training or skill building or mentorship so we can create more of a skill-based community?
I actually have a very. Did you set me up for that? Tracy. Actually, I think that ties into how the community can grow.
What was the question?
The question was, are there examples of skill training, workforce development for the film industry, essentially, right? And I think that primarily is targeting those that aren't in it now, right? And I think with the kind of call to action that the community is experiencing at the moment, that could be one of the things that gets brought up. I think it would serve everybody really well to say, not only do we want state incentives that increase the purse size, but we should have city incentives on top of that. And there's some really incredible programs around the country. New Orleans has it, I think Detroit has it, there's a few others, where a city throws in another $10 million on top of it, but the money is tied to strings like, hey, the production has to be environmentally sensitive, it has to be a green production, or it has to hire immigrant minorities and people that aren't connected to internships, and then it could get even more money. And if it does it in a depressed part of town, it gets even more money. So there's ways of getting production to service some of these ideas that I think could come up, and that should absolutely be a part of the conversation.
And technically, it has been part of the conversation in Seattle for a really long time. It's just we have had our eyes on such a bigger prize and of getting just the incentive to stick around, that now that it's around for, 3 more years locked in, or maybe still 4, I don't know. But it's a good time to focus on sort of making those sort of other advancements. Like I talked to Lindsay in probably 2007 about a green incentive in Seattle, and at the time, I don't know if this is true anymore, I still actually think it is true, that if we could create one, it would be the first financial incentive to shoot green in the nation. And I think that would be, Seattle is like the perfect place for that to happen. And so I would love to see that happen. That's like one of my sort of core beliefs, is that this industry is way behind in terms of sustainability, and it's not that big of a burden on a production to shoot green, as demonstrated with my last 3 films. And so yeah, so that and it, there's just so many things that we can do, we can focus our energy on in terms of improving and sort of making ourselves sort of noteworthy as a filmmaking community and innovator in that way. So.
And there's incredible attention to labor right now. I mean, right? Whether it's Kashama or the mayor or anyone else, there's a lot of focus on labor. So let's get labor into that conversation to talk about.
Yeah, actually, just to that point, that's another conversation I think with Amy Lillard probably 5 years ago, was talking about how to sort of bring in the unions to talk about how to start training people on set. I personally worked I didn't get paid to work on a film for the first 5 years of my career, and I got a lot out of that. My time volunteering on sets really set me up for what, sort of to absorb as much as possible and sort of go on to be able to make a living at it. And I always get frustrated at the idea that we're not sort of facilitating that process for people. Julia wants to say something.
I have something to say about that. So, and I think you were talking about mentorships too, and apprenticeships, which is something that we don't have, and it's something that Women in Film instituted and had huge amount of difficulty. And I love the unions, I really do, but we had a huge amount of difficulty being able to put someone on set to shadow, intern, apprentice, and be mentored, because it was taken away from, their perception was it was taken away from another job. So it's a program we had to stop because it was so hard to have happen. And I think the important thing is to do what you do. work on a set, that's the only way that you're ever gonna learn the film industry. You don't learn it so much in film school, you learn it by doing on the set. And you volunteering your time is actually illegal. You have to
Yeah,
be paid
which,
something.
which is why the conversation, having some sort of apprenticeship conversation with the, bringing in the union
Yeah.
leaders to these conversations is
Is-
important. And
Exactly.
I think Amy started to do that many years ago. You probably were involved in those conversations too. And it's just, a matter of getting that on paper somehow.
Yeah, and that's a way of building our crew and making it deeper so that we can accommodate more than 4 films that come.
Let's face it, it's happening anyway. We might as well sanction it.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
To the question of profit, if I may, there's a lot of extra money sort of sloshing around here in King County, but I'd like to know what kinds of initiatives on a city or a county level there are to sort of educate possible investors in film, so we actually have people working, people getting paid for movies that would have greater, bigger budgets, but with an intention of a payback and a profit being made. A la other areas of, Utah, for instance, has a very organized investor community, as well as Los Angeles, of course. So what's happening in Seattle and King County with that?
As far as I know, nothing. You may know differently. I think that is a brilliant idea. Sundance just started, Sundance Film Festival or Institute just started a program to educate investors. They have like a retreat in Utah that I know Lynn went to this year to have filmmakers talk to investors and like vice versa about that relationship and build sort of the education on both fronts. So that would be, I think, a really nice thing to add to the conversation here. I remember when I was fundraising for the Off Hours, which was a generally unsuccessful endeavor. We were trying a lot of things, and one of the things we heard was that Washington had more millionaires per capita than any other state in the union. I don't know if that's true anymore. This is like, 7 years ago, but it was. We were like, but where are they, and how do we get to them? Do we just call people who, how do we find their phone numbers? But anyway, so that's sort of like building those relationships and educating people, I think is super smart.
Yeah, there's I think needs to be education done for investors, both to learn how to invest in films and to not invest in films. I mean, I think too often good films don't get the investment that it should get, and some films get the investment that it's not ready for. And it's about creating a culture from which people can vet projects and know how to judge a good project from a bad project. And that culture doesn't exist up here very well. There's no shortage of wealth. It's just understanding how to invest that wealth. And there's a couple of groups that are trying to get into that. Xeno Society is trying. They've done a pretty good job. In fact, Sue Corcoran was successful in finding a tremendous amount of investment through that mechanism. And I think people are starting to pay attention to it. But the reality is, I'll tie it all back to the state film incentive program and whatever the city can do on top of that. But the more money there is in activity, the more people will pay attention and those things start happening. So it's really that's the key. That's the keystone for the whole thing, is getting that going. Because then you start getting Amazon making more of its production here. Then you start getting Microsoft making more of its production here. And then you start having agencies making more of its production here. And when that kind of money's taking place here, then people start talking about it, the more it opens up.
I worked on both movies that shot in Everett, and they both, I believe, shot in Everett because Everett kicked some money into it.
It's a great example.
And I would love Seattle to do the same, so I didn't have to drive so So I'm wondering, do we have a sense yet of our new mayor and his support for the film community? Do we know what might change, what might stay the same, what might progress?
It was so amazing talking to Parker Posey and saying, so, how's Mukilteo? yeah, you don't have to look very farther than you'd like to commute maybe, to see how cities can get in the game along with the state to track production. And, I think I haven't had a lot of conversation with the mayor about that. But I do know that the mayor was extremely supportive of the state film program starting and keeping it alive. Extremely, like front line, making it happen. And I think that there's no reason to believe that commitment's not still there. Is that done, Laura?
I was just excited to hear that. That's great. I didn't know that.
I think there was a question back there.
Yeah, I find that when it comes to incentives and discussions about how government can get involved in production, that a lot of it focuses either in commercial areas or in narrative filmmaking, and I'm wondering to what extent the city is involved with the documentary community, or how you would suggest maybe at this meeting on Tuesday that a group of documentary filmmakers get organized and talk to the city about how documentary can become part of the conversation.
Well, James, you had an interesting idea earlier about structuring conversation potentially on Tuesday in terms of groups.
Yeah.
So you all go into little groups. Actually, it's so true. Like, I'm not even joking. This is so HR talk, but I think I think what should happen, Kirk, you're going to be running the show, so I'll leave it up to you. But my recommendation would be to get the whole group into as many smaller groups as you can manage, so that everybody can bring up conversations like Adam's talking about right now, and get them up on a board, have those reported back to the whole group at large, make sense of them in a very clear kind of manifesto, and have that driven to Kate and to the mayor and to the state, and say, we are really excited about doing those things, and we want to be together in doing those things, and let's start talking about that. And so that's what I would recommend. And that would be a really constructive use of the event on the 18th. Adam, as it relates to documentary, I'm curious to see what you bring to that conversation, because for me it's always been, I'm kind of format agnostic. I don't care. Like, I don't care if it's good or bad. I don't care if it's doc or narrative. I don't care if it's a commercial or whatever. It's about, can people make a living doing this? And is there enough production to sustain a broader group of people? And if that's documentary, filmmaking on a very complicated story, or something around reality TV, who cares? I honestly, at the end of the day, it's about, are people working? For me, that's been my approach.
Yep. And I gotta say, the Northwest Film Forum is blazing a little bit of a trail on the documentary front with the Doc Fund. So there's good work happening. So it's another case of, like, institutionalizing support.
Other questions?
Nope, they're all done.
Wow. You can certainly continue the conversation out in the lobby, and I would just say, yeah, thanks for coming and participating in this very broad-ranging conversation that covered everything from the New York Times to Crewtopia in Seattle. So thank you.
Let's hear it for James.
Come to the party on the 26th.
Showbox.
Yeah, it's on my calendar.